Your future obsession is here. I'm Kat and welcome to Your Future Obsession. We're at the Spotify headquarters in Stockholm, Sweden, bringing you bold conversations with leaders shaping tomorrow. Today, we're going to dive deep into the future of AI and audio with a true industry leader, Gustav Söderström, co-president and chief product and technology officer at Spotify.
Thank you for having me, Katarina.
Thank you so much.
Perfect pronunciation of the last name.
I've been practicing. So we all know that you've had a fascinating journey here at Spotify. Can you give the listeners a little bit of background on yourself and what your role is today?
Sure. So I'm originally an engineer in electrical engineering and computer science, and I graduated in 2003. This was the tail end of the IT crash, and so there were no jobs to be had. And I really wanted a job at a big, quote-unquote, boring company. I didn't really have the vision to become an entrepreneur, but I had to become an entrepreneur by necessity because there were no jobs to be had. And the benefit of bad times is that I couldn't get a job, but neither could anyone else who was really smart. So it was very easy and cheap to find smart people to do stuff with. So I started a company in sort of mobile messaging space. This was before the iPhone. And then long story short, that kind of worked out. So we sold it to Yahoo in the US. And then I spent a few years at Yahoo in the US. And then I came back to Sweden after that, trying to figure out what to do in my life. And then I met Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify. And he showed me the desktop version of Spotify, which was amazing. It was just, I was completely floored. It was one of the best products I've ever tried. And he said, this is the desktop version of Spotify, but really this was 2008. So the iPhone was there, but there was no app store yet, I think. But the writing was on the wall. And he said to me, we're going to need a mobile experience. I would like to come on board and head up whatever Spotify mobile should be. So that was my first job at Spotify, to be head of product for mobile. I came on and I met the team, which was maybe 30 something people at the time. And we tried to figure out both what Spotify mobile should be as an experience, because Spotify on the desktop was really all about being always connected to the internet. It happened in Sweden because Sweden had high bandwidth, low latency broadband sort of before the rest of the world because of government investments actually. So people expected Spotify mobile to be the same thing. The whole point was that you didn't need to download anything. But then when you use Spotify mobile, that paradigm didn't work. The mobile networks back then were absolute crap. So if you try to stream the music over 3G, or not even 3G back then, edge networks or 2G networks, the music would stutter, your data plan would run out of money in after one song. So we had to rethink everything. Really our competition for the mobile phone was not Pirate Bay. On desktop the competition was better than piracy, but on your phone the competition was actually better than your iPod. And most people actually pirated their music from Pirate Bay to their iPod. So we had to make sure that Spotify mobile worked even when there was no internet connection, in the subway, on a flight, when you were abroad. So we had to sort of to invent this offline mode. So my job was to go to the music industry and explain to them that we could download 10,000 songs, we could encrypt it on your phone, and you could be offline for up to a month. But then if you didn't connect to the internet and verify that you were still a paying customer, we could sort of lock those files. Even you as a user couldn't listen anymore. And so I spent a lot of time with the labels, going through white papers and explaining how encryption works and that you really can lock those files. And eventually we convinced them, and that became Spotify mobile. So that's how I started. And then I took over all product development for Spotify, not just mobile, and then eventually also technology for Spotify. So now I run product and technology, and I've been doing that since then. It's the same job actually forever.
It just kind of evolves over time?
Yeah, the company gets bigger all the time, so it feels like a new job, but it's actually been sort of the same job.
Oh, that's awesome. I definitely loved hearing how you were in a time where nobody had jobs, you didn't have a job, but you turned it into entrepreneurial inspiration for yourself. That's similar to me. During COVID, I lost my job and was at home, and something I was always so passionate about was technology. So that's when I started making videos. I feel like those times you really spark what you're passionate about and kind of like get going with it. Is that how you feel too?
Yeah, 100%. I think some of these things that life does to you can be very painful, but sometimes it actually turns out to be good for you. It was for me, and this old Steve Jobs saying that, in retrospect, you can connect the dots.
Yeah.
But not when it happens. It just looks like randomness. Maybe it is randomness and you make up the connections afterwards, but I still think it's a nice way to think about it.
So what is your day-to-day kind of like? So this morning we had you coming on stage with the tech insiders and telling us some top secret information that we're going to talk about later. But how is your day-to-day looking?
So it depends on what part of the year. Spotify actually works in sort of 6-month increments where we sit down as a team and figure out what do we want to do for the next 6 months. We have people pitch ideas. It's actually a literal startup competition. So people do 15-minute pitches and they have to practice and they're recorded, and we try to make it real. Like you have to be able to believe in your idea and pitch it as if we were an investor, because we kind of are.
Yeah.
And so people really like that. So last week actually, I sat through 50 pitches for new ideas, 15 minutes each. That took 2 days. And then me and Alex Norström, the other co-president, we try to decide which of these things we believe the most in, and then we put them in a stack-ranked prioritization list. And we finished that yesterday, actually, that list. And then we send it back to the company, and the company looks at it and says, okay, out of these 50 things, we think we can do the top 20, 25, 30, depending on how much capacity they have. So the company actually commits themselves. We don't tell the company what it can do. The company commits. But this is actually the most fun part of the year, because sitting through all these great ideas and people being very energized about the thing that they love. It's both fun because they're great ideas and painful because we have to choose. I would just love to do all of them, but we never can.
Yeah.
The other thing we do is we try to prototype all of these. We build a huge Figma prototype. Figma breaks all the time for us. So we try to have all of these ideas in a clickable prototype. So it feels, you can sort of see into the future. What would Spotify look like 6 to 12 months from now if we built this? So that's what I've done this week, a lot of prioritization and scoping and stuff. But then after this period, it's very different, because then people go into building mode. Then I focus on other things. Can be anything from licensing to technology investments to things like this.
Wow, I feel like you have such crazy busy days. How do you start your morning off on the right foot? I know for me, I always put on my Spotify playlist to get me in the right headspace. Is there something you do every morning to kind of set you up for success?
I live some ways out of the city, and I drive to work, and I'm at work most days. So I use the commuting time to listen to Spotify. And sometimes it's music, but a lot of the time it's podcasts about either current events, often technology, not so much news. It's more things that I'm interested in, maybe technology, AI, the music business, etc. Or sometimes just audiobooks. If I really want some mind space to think about something else, I've listened to a bunch of audiobooks about. I re-listened to The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch, the father of quantum computing, recently.
Yeah.
Because those are big ideas that, they're going to be relevant 1,000 years from now. It depends on what. Sometimes I would really want to get out of the here and now, and then I listen to books. Yeah. Other times I really want to be in the here and now, and then I listen to the latest podcast about business or technology.
That's same with me. I feel like I need to start every day off with something inspirational to get my day going. So can you share some key moments or experiences that kind of shaped your approach to technology and leadership?
I think my relationship to technology was a little bit innate. I think I've always been very interested in technology, the old story of like playing with computers and picking things apart. So I think that part of me has been there all along. I just was lucky enough to get to express it. And back then, at least, the pressure on the educational system was not that high in Sweden. You didn't need to have like top grades to get into the best school. So I got some time to figure out what I actually wanted. And now I feel a bit bad for younger people now, because like the needle hole is so small.
Yeah.
There's so much pressure to be able to do what you want. It wasn't actually like that when I grew up. You had a bit more time to figure out what you wanted, and I managed to find what I was really passionate about. And then when I figured that, then I could produce good results because I was passionate about it. So it was always there, but I found I had some time to figure it out. Then I think in terms of leadership, I've had a few transformational experiences in my life. Where I grew up was not a super nice place. I didn't have good role models in terms of leadership. It was a lot about leading by, force or fear, or like that kind of macho attitude, which is not that great. So really, the first time I saw something different was when Sweden had conscription back then. So you had to do at least some time in the army. So I had to do 18 months in the army. And
Wow.
it took me from this little concrete suburb where I had grown up that I thought was the entire world, up to the polar circle where I spent 18 months learning how to ski and sleeping under trees and stuff. And there I saw a different type of leadership, which was instead of like whatever leading by fear or something, it was leading by example. The leaders that we had, they said like, I want to go from here to there, but I'm actually going to go first. And then it was like, oh, well, if you're going to do it, then I'm going to do it. So leading by example was something that is obvious, but made a big impression on me that I try to use in professional life. At Spotify, when we were doing like the big US launch, if you're asking people to sleep in the office, you probably should bring your own sleeping bag and sleep there, right? People do what you do, not what you tell them. So that made a big impression on me. That leadership model doesn't scale. You can't like do everything yourself. You're not going to be better than anyone else at everything. Hopefully, at least if you hire smart people, they're going to be better than you. So that is a good model, but it doesn't scale to like thousands of people. The second leadership model that I encountered was when I started at university after the military, which was this idea of meritocracy. So it's just the best idea wins. And you have these Socratic debates. And it doesn't matter who's the biggest or strongest, or who raises the voice the loudest, like the best idea wins. And it may sound strange, but that was new to me. I hadn't been in that academic environment. It was like the one who had the loudest voice, not the one with the best idea. So that made a deep impression on me. And I try to foster that at Spotify. We talk a lot about Socratic debates. While many companies say that you shouldn't talk so much, it should be fast. I try to say that talk is very cheap, so you should do quite a lot of it. It's a very cheap way to get to better ideas. So those are the things that made the biggest impression on me.
You can definitely tell, even just walking around here in Stockholm at your HQ, that it's a very collaborative workplace and everyone's always really in sync. Even just the conversations I hear in the hallways or like people bring me from place to place, I really see that, and from an outsider coming in, it's impressive.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
We try. There are downsides to a lot of debate. Sometimes it can feel slow. At some point you may need to decide, like, we're actually going in this direction, so you need to balance it with being clear. If everyone produces their own idea in different directions, you're not going to produce anything but heat. So there's a balance there. And the Swedish mentality is, I don't know if you've seen these pictures of how different nationalities make decisions.
Yeah.
The Swedes the Americans tend to be, there's someone at the top and there's a star pattern. The Swedes tend to sit in a circle, and like one of the leaders is part of the circle. And this can be frustrating sometimes because the Swedish decision model has its benefits, but it can be very slow. So we're trying to balance that. We also have a lot of different nationalities in the company and try to find the best mix of bottoms up, but still being pretty clear on where we're going.
Right. Personalization is core to Spotify's success. How are you refining and improving the algorithms and other personalized experiences here at Spotify?
I think you can divide it into two things. What was called personalization, we used to call machine learning. And those were literally machines that could learn patterns, statistical patterns. Like if we show a lot of this music to this type of user that also listen to this music, that tends to work. The old, like, if you like this, you probably like this because other people who like that like this.
Yeah.
That was the first wave of machine learning. We've invested a lot in that. We had a big benefit in that in order to understand that people who like this also like this, it's very useful if you could have people grouping things together that they think fit. And that's actually what we call Spotify playlists. So we've literally had billions of playlists where people have sat meticulous and said, like, this Avicii song goes well with this other EDM song. And so we have lots of, if you want, what you could almost call labeled data. People were not labeling it for machine learning purposes, but they were creating sessions for themselves. But that was really important training data for us to understand that people who listen to this song probably also like this song. So that was like the first wave of personalization.
Right.
Now we're starting to enter a second wave, the one that people call AI, artificial intelligence, instead of machine learning. And it's not clear actually what the difference is. A lot of people would say, like, well, machine learning was also AI, just not as smart. But I think what people mean is this ability to actually understand and reason. The old models were statistical things, probabilistic things. We've invested a lot in personalization, and personalization is also evolving. These large language models, the LLMs that people talk so much about, they are actually making personalization and recommendations much better as well. So there's a big investment in using the new generation of large language models for better music recommendations, better podcast recommendations, better book recommendations. It's called generative recommendations. So that's one thing. What I find very exciting is this other thing. now, for the first time in history, you as a user could actually potentially talk to Spotify, and we could talk back to you. Previously, the conversation we had with the user was, we suggested something on screen, and then you could either play it or you could skip it. So your conversation was just plays and skips. And if you think about it, that's a very blunt signal. So if we play a song to you and you skip it, does that mean that you actually hated the song? Or do you love the song, but it didn't fit right now because you were cooking, you were not running?
Yeah, you're just not in the mood.
To us, it looks like a skip. A skip is a skip. So it's very hard for us to do good machine learning with that blunt tool. The promise of AI and voice interaction and text interaction is you can literally say like, no, listen, Spotify, I'm really bored with whatever it is, EDM right now.
Yeah.
I used to love it. I don't anymore. That has never existed before. And we could actually have a conversation with you, not as an analogy, but as reality. So that's what I'm excited about, the ability to talk, for you to talk to us and us to talk back at scale. We've always done these like user research things where we took a feature, we invited maybe 20 users, we let them use the feature, and we have a literal conversation to understand what they actually think about it. But it was always a sample size of 20 people. We could never have that conversation with 700 million users. Now we can. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Do you get a lot of your feedback? Do you see it on like other social media platforms, or is it just in those small niche groups of people you test? Or like, how do these great things come to be? Especially for AI playlists. I always use AI playlist tool. For the listeners who don't know what that is, it's basically if you have like an era you want to listen to, or just like a prompt, like I want to listen to 90s rom-com music, and then you get a personalized playlist for that. So how did the idea come to be, and where do you guys get your inspiration from?
We do get a lot of feedback from social media, from X and Instagram and TikTok. If I go there, like, people have opinions, lots of opinions, good and bad, but they're all useful. So that's definitely one source of both inspiration, but also feedback when we've done something wrong. And you can look at, I read many of them just myself, but you can also look at it statistically to understand sentiment and so forth. So definitely the world in social media is a big input. But we try to mix that with also our own ideas. The idea that users don't always necessarily know what they're going to want in the future. There's this old Henry Ford saying that if you asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, not a car, that kind of thing. So you also have to balance it with, we're going to try something that no one is yet asking for. Maybe it's wrong, but maybe it's right. So it's a combination of both, outside in and also inside out. But in my job, you know, I can't go anywhere to any dinner party without coming home with like 5 feature requests. Everyone has their pet peeve. And I love that. I try to always write them down. So yeah, there's a lot of inputs from the world.
For myself too, I feel like I get a lot of inspiration from people telling me like something they didn't like, for example, of like my video, or and it kind of like pushes me to think even more outside of the box. Yeah. So it's interesting to hear you say that. How do you think AI is going to shape music as a whole? Because we see how it really changes the consumer, the listener's experience, but how do you see that more broad?
So I think creativity always evolves with society, whether it's art and paintings or photography or something. It's going to be shaped by the distribution medium and by how people want to consume it. And so I think music started changing even before AI, because in the world where you sort of either downloaded a full file, or if you were on iTunes and paid per file, it would cost you $1.99 per song, right?
Yep.
So you would actually spend quite a lot of time, like maybe listening somewhere else on YouTube or radio or something, and then you made like, I'm going to spend my dollar here. But that actually shaped how you consume music, right? You would not really, sleep music is now a big thing. You wouldn't have soundtracked your sleep at $1 per 3 minutes. That's expensive sleep, right? So what happened when the access model came instead of the pay per song model is people started using music differently. They started using music for the meditation and sleep and things that didn't make any sense when you were paying 99 cents per 3 minutes or 33 cents per minute. So that shaped which music got listened to, and then people started producing for those use cases. So people started being more adventurous. When the cost of discovery was 99 cents, you're going to be careful in your music taste. When the cost is 0 because you already paid your $9.99 or it's free with ads, you're just going to try more things. So one really interesting thing that happened was when I started at Spotify, whenever a new user joined Spotify, if they were born like in the, let's say the late 70s or something like me, their first search was almost always Metallica. Because
I'm going to the concert in a few weeks.
It's so good.
Sorry.
I mean, it's a great search. But if you
Yeah.
think about it, what's the reason for that? Well, it's because the music that tends to shape you is what happens in your late teen years, like 18, 19. So that's when you shape your musical identity. Actually, a bit earlier, 16, 15 to 18. And if you look at that generation, that was Metallica. And so when they came back, being 35, Metallica was still their first search, because at 99 cents per song, they didn't have time or money to develop their music taste. But what you saw once they came into Spotify, when there was no marginal cost to try a new song, their music taste started evolving again. So the medium does affect it. Another thing we've seen is, in this world of people trying new music, you do see the songs getting shorter. You do see the intros getting more impactful, and the lyric and the chorus moving up. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. Something like Bohemian Rhapsody may have had a hard time getting traction today because it's so long before it gets started. And I love Bohemian Rhapsody. So I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it is.
Mm-hmm.
The medium does shape it.
I know for me, I find a lot of music I like when I'm scrolling on TikTok. And I love that you guys now have the integration where it brings me straight to Spotify.
So happy.
Because I always feel like I'm listening to the same songs, where I used to be. It was always Britney Spears, same songs I was listening to for 15 years. So I feel like now discovery has changed so much. And for me personally, I know I'm broadening my horizons in terms of music. Is that one of your guys' goals as well?
100%. Talking about feedback from social media, we do get that feedback. People feel like Spotify is great, but I kind of feel trapped in my taste bubble. And the truth is, Spotify initially, when we came to market, we mostly reflected things that happen in society, music you found elsewhere. Back then it wasn't TikTok, it was YouTube, maybe radio.
Yep.
But we mostly reflected things that happen in other places, and then you put that sort of into your quote-unquote iPod, and then you listen to that. We didn't affect your music taste as much. So this is one of the big opportunities for Spotify. So we're doing two things. We are integrating, for example, with TikTok, where people do discover a lot of music. So people discover music on TikTok, in their Netflix shows, etc. We want to make it really easy for you to just save that to Spotify. But we're also trying to make it easier to discover new music on Spotify. So we're investing in these music feeds outside of the US. We haven't launched in the US yet, but outside of the US, we now have music videos for most music. I think having a music video is critical for the discovery part, not for the repetition listening. You don't watch it many times, but when you discover something new, you're going to want to see who this artist is. So we're investing a lot in tools on Spotify to broaden your taste, but also integrating with every other place where you do broaden your taste.
I've also felt like, because there's such high discoverability now, that we have podcasts and audiobooks on Spotify. That's also helped me, like, it gives me suggestions, right, of what they think I'm gonna like. So now I listen to a lot more audiobooks and podcasts. What are your visions for these areas? I know you mentioned adding in video. We have that on podcasts, but what's kind of the look for the future?
I spent a lot of time at Spotify, over 15 years. And it's been for a long while, but it's becoming increasingly important to do something that I think matters, or at least that I'm happy about, rather than just chasing the most engagement. And so that's one of the reasons I've pushed very hard for podcasts and audiobooks, because I felt like one of the unique things with Spotify is most people agree that music is almost, unequivocally good. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's some bad music, but for the most part, music is a good thing that you feel good about, that makes you happy. And I've felt the same thing about podcasts. It was good because it let people have conversations like this, where you could speak in full sentences. It was the opposite of the cutting up people and like misrepresenting them.
Right.
So I think, there are podcasts that can be controversial, and there are podcasts maybe that aren't good for some people, but by and large, it's a good thing for the world to have conversations. And then books is the same thing. I think books are the most important things in the world. That's literally where all the crystallized information about humanity is. So I want Spotify to be this, nutritious place. There are many delicious places on the internet where you can lose a lot of time, but once you come out of that, you spent a few hours there, you may feel like you ate too much candy. You don't feel like great about yourself. What I would like for Spotify is, if you lose 2 hours, you come out, you feel like those were hours well spent. I listened to music, or I learned something from a book, or I joined this deep conversation. I want Spotify to be something where you feel good about the time you spent. And that's both for the world, but also, I frankly think, if you're a subscription service, the correlation to pay is probably if you actually like what you're doing. when you mostly monetize with ads, you're going to be very incentivized to just maximize time to monetize the engagement. But almost 90% of Spotify's revenues are subscription, and people will vote with their wallet every month. Like, is it really worth it? Is it really worth it? And I think that correlates to like, do I like the time I spent? So it's both incentivizing our business model to actually do things that you feel good about, but it's also my personal mission. Is why waste, like, life is short, and as far as I know, we only have one of it. Why waste it on something that you're not passionate about?
I think that, especially my generation, we're stuck doom scrolling, and I don't feel like maybe I'm doing it for hours, and I don't feel
it's
like
not
I'm
just
really...
your generation.
You too?
It's just that the older people like me are stuck on the same thing, but on other services.
Right, like we're doom scrolling, and then I don't feel good about it afterwards. But on Spotify, like you said, I can learn. I can kind of feel better about my situation. Maybe I find something that's inspirational, and it's kind of a scroll feed. Do you see Spotify having more of the scroll feed, or do you see the UI changing?
So this is a really interesting question for me. We have some of those scroll feeds for music, because it turns out that for you to find music, you still want, as a user, efficiency. You want to be able to listen and see the video, and then if you don't like it, just quickly get to the next one. It's kind of like the skip button, but in the foreground, because as I said, I think video is important in the foreground.
I think so
too. So we have some of those feeds, but the metric that we focus on is how many songs can we get you to save for later, for actual enjoyment, rather than just to capture you in the moment. Mm-hmm. So that's one parameter. So we have some of those feeds, and that is the paradigm that is the most effective for presenting new content to people. So we do use those patterns, but we try to use it for books, podcasts, and music, rather than just attention clips, right? So it's the same paradigm, but for different type of content. But I think you're touching on something very interesting, which is that is the best UI for discovering new content in the current sort of machine learning paradigm that we've been in, with these statistical probability engines that tries to suggest things to you and see who clicks the most and so forth. But we're exiting that now. We're going into this AI paradigm, where instead of assuming there's some probabilistic math engine behind the screen, you're assuming that there's real intelligence, someone who would understand you deeply, that you could talk to and say, today I'm feeling sad and so and this and that, or today I just want to explore something new. We've never been able to assume true intelligence behind these servers, just probabilistic engines. So my question is, the epitome of the user interface for the probabilistic age was the sort of the TikTok full screen swipe feed. Mm-hmm. Is that really going to be the epitome of the intelligence age? I'd be surprised if the same UI is the best UI for true intelligence. Maybe it's going to be more conversational, but I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be different. And that's very exciting for me as a product person, because these paradigm shifts is when the world gets really exciting.
Of course. So it's interesting we're talking about change. Prior to this, we learned about the AI DJ taking requests. That's really exciting for me, and I feel like I'm going to be abusing that. I already talked to the AI DJ, Xavier, as if he's my friend, like when I'm making playlists. And now it's actually going to be a real person there to help you and kind of give you inspiration. Can you talk a little bit about that and tell the listeners what's new?
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you're saying as if it's a friend, because that's actually what we're going for. Many of the other services are going for, they want you to think of it either as a robot or as an assistant. We would really like you to think of it as a friend that can get to know you better. So I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's what we're going for. And that's how we shape the whole, we digitized X, who's a real person, who is like one of my better friends, actually.
When I met him, it felt weird. I felt like I had a parasocial relationship with him, because
you his voice. Because he is that nice in real world, actually.
He is. He acts like he is his persona.
Yeah. So that was the idea, like find someone with a lot of energy and then try to sort of digitize that instead of going this assistant robot route. But you've never been able to speak to him or to DJ Liv in Spanish, for example, which is the same idea. We found someone who works at Spotify with super high energy, and so we digitized her for Spanish.
So it's available in English and Spanish?
In English and Spanish right now. And you can choose, even in the US, you can choose Spanish. But so the idea is now the DJ takes requests. And for us, this is very, very exciting, because as I said, previously, we had to guess what was actually in your mind based on a few clicks and things we presented on screen. And it's very hard to predict how you're feeling today based on your click stream. But now you can just say like, no, today I'm either very happy or I'm actually in a melancholy mood. Now I just want to hear like sad indie pop on the way to work. You can literally just tell us what you want and we can try to serve that. And for me, having used it, it is a game changer for exactly this moment when you feel trapped in your taste. Like I kind of love my music, but then every now and then I'm like, no, I want something completely different. It was very hard, almost impossible to tell Spotify that before. Now I can literally say, play me so-and-so, but only things I've never heard before. And that's a big deal. And I do that every 10th session. I say only things I've never heard before. So you can literally break out of your bubble.
I'm excited to try it for Croatian music. So I listen to a lot of Croatian music. That's where I'm from. And it's hard to find new songs because it sometimes doesn't come up in playlists. A lot of people aren't making it. So now I have a friend, as I would say, who can give me new songs like that.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm at the gym, I always text either my sister or one of my friends like, hey, like send me one of your playlists because I like to listen to what they are listening to. So now kind of just, I can have a person there all the time.
That's the idea. I ask it, play me the music that is trending in South Korea right now, for example.
Cool.
Just because I want to understand what's happening in some completely different place.
So you're using it for learning and educational purposes too.
Yeah, some sessions.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like if Spotify only had to guess, the best guess is always play your favorite songs. It's a good guess.
Yeah.
But it's not always right. Now I have the chance to say like, today, that's not what I want. I want something very, very different.
So for the future, we can probably expect to have AI help us find podcasts and audiobooks as well. Where else do you see this kind of transitioning into?
Well, I think an obvious thing, even though the DJ is only music, if this works for music, why wouldn't it work for podcasts? Be able to ask about specific topics, and then books is very similar in a way. So I think there could be a rejuvenation of books because you can get recommendations for things that you are interested in. So those two things we are working on, and I think you should expect happening at some point. Then the question is where it goes. I think is very interesting because these agents, they are very good at going through lots of books and podcasts and understanding what people talk about, but they also have world knowledge that isn't even in the podcast. You can ask questions about the world and then have it relate to podcasts or books or music. You can listen to something and then say like, actually, I didn't understand that. Could you explain that? And it's pretty easy for these LLMs to explain it because they have a lot of knowledge.
My wheels are turning. I'm like, I would love to be able to listen to a book or a podcast and then have AI give me like a little synopsis or recommend like, if you liked this is a good recommendation for you, or even like, this is what they meant in this paragraph or something like that.
Yeah, I think all of those things are very possible if you look at the technology. What I'm most excited about is with the DJ becoming aware of what happens in the world. It used to be that, some people at Spotify was aware of who won the Grammys yesterday, or actually who was most likely to win the Grammys according to the internet. But you couldn't really know that. Now you can ask, and the DJ can go out and do a search and say like, well, people think that this is the best candidate, or, I just think combining world information with the catalog is very exciting.
Do you think there's anything about the future of AI and music that people are overlooking that you're really excited about?
No, I think the biggest things are the generative recommendations, which kind of sounds technical and boring, but it is, if you're into the technology, it's a very interesting development because it can make the personalizations much more personal to your situation. The reason we call it a DJ is because the end vision is a true DJ. If you had a friend,
requests,
if you had a friend that, your best friend, they know your life history, they know your music taste, they know what happens in the world, and they're awake there 24 hours a day, and you could just tell them like, just make some music set for me, how I'm feeling today. That's really the dream, and there's a lot left on that dream, but we're taking steps. So that's what I'm most excited about.
You guys are really ahead of the curve for both listeners and creators. So as a creator myself, what's something we can expect?
So as a video creator, you've seen us invest quite a lot recently in video on Spotify. We had video for a long time for podcasters, but it was underinvested in a couple of ways. One was the experience itself wasn't good enough. The mobile experience wasn't good enough, but our TV experience, which is very important for video creators, a lot of consumption is happening on the TV, wasn't good enough. So we invested a lot in that. So our TV experience on Samsung, for example, is very good now, both for music but also for video podcasts. Things like image quality, offline sync, all of these things that are important if you want to be a video platform. But then also, as I said, the discovery formats, we were optimized for an audio-only landscape where discovery happened in the background with your phone in your pocket, and you could listen to a radio set on Spotify. But with video, people want to discover with video in the foreground. So we built a lot of that functionality. We're now a pretty good video platform. But one of the more important things we did behind the scenes was there was this misalignment between audio podcast creators and video podcast creators. Because audio podcast creators, they monetize with something called DAI, dynamic ad insertion. And so if they went, and DAI doesn't work in video because there's a for audio there. When they went to video, they would actually monetize worse on Spotify. So the incentives were disincentive to have video on Spotify. So we announced this fall, and then in January we launched this thing called SPP, Spotify Partner Program, where the idea is simply, if you're a premium user, we pay out to you as a creator sort of per minute or per hour instead. And the user doesn't get ads in those Spotify ads in those podcasts. It's both a better user experience, which as for you as a creator means your listening goes up. Like the ads are not good for your listening. They're going to churn out users. So now your experience got better for users, but we didn't demonetize you. In fact, many creators make more money from SPP than they used to do for ads. And that really unlocked it. So now we're getting a lot more video, and we're aligned, both Spotify creators and users. There was this weird thing where the creators had to put in more ads to make more money, but then they made their own product worse for their own listeners. So they would lose listeners. Now that's aligned. So that was a big shift that is really working for us right now. We're getting a lot more video on Spotify.
I was actually at the event in LA and in the fall, and I was so blown away by how much you guys are actually thinking about the creator and like their perspective, that's the reason why I actually started this podcast.
That's great to hear. I mean, we're trying. We have a really good podcast team headed up by Maya and some other people, and they're investing a lot in the creator experience. And we have a lot left to do, but it's gotten drastically better in the last year, and we're on a quick improvement path.
Yeah, it's also like an ease of entry. If it's too complicated for someone to start a podcast or feel like they're going to get some discoverability or get people to look at their podcast, they're never going to start. Yeah. But you guys like really showed that, hey, as a creator, you can go for it. We're going to be pushing out videos, and that's really awesome to see. And
also, you mentioned something there. When you start as a new creator, one of the problems we have to help with is how do you get your first listeners? If the algorithms only promote things that are already popular, you're never going to get big unless you were already big, and then it's only the existing ones. So we've had to work hard on making sure that we give discovery to podcasts that don't have any listeners yet so that they get a chance to grow, and that's starting to work now.
And do you feel like audiobooks or even music artists are seeing that from their side and their perspective as well? Like more people are putting out audiobooks because of the discoverability?
Yeah, so audiobooks is changing very quickly. I'm very happy to see that authors and publishers are very happy about Spotify's entry into audiobooks because we're helping grow the market very quickly. We think audiobooks is going to be very big as a consumer segment. They are very happy, and they're simply making good money that they weren't making before. So I don't want to speak for them, but we've gotten a lot of very positive feedback from the author and publisher community, which I'm very happy about. And podcasters, as I said, specifically as of recently, we've had podcasters that have gone out and say like, well, now I see both my usage go up and my monetization go up on Spotify. So we're starting to see that feedback, which I'm happy about. But ultimately, they have to speak for themselves.
We're going to end off the podcast with a few personal questions because you're very inspirational. So I want to know, what is something you do every day that makes you stay ahead of the curve in terms of technology, whether that be a routine or just something in your personal life?
I do that morning commute where I try to make sure I curate what I listen to and have a few sources that are very good at summarizing and curating both what happens in the intersection of technology and business. So I spend at least then 40 minutes, 45 minutes per day on that. And that keeps me up to date on the latest and greatest. And it's a combination of technology, AI, business, user interface, music business. So that's what I do day to day. But then, as we talked about initially, there's also the longer term thinking that you have to do. And I don't do that every day, but I try to have a few times a week. I try to spend time with smart people either inside the company. One of the great benefits, several people that work for me are very, very smart and inspirational to be with. So I book time to just talk about the future and say, I don't want to talk about the problems right now. What should we do in a year? And I also do that with people outside the company. One of the benefits of working at Spotify is I can get a hold of interesting people and inspirational people. So every day I try to keep up to date, but then maybe once a week or at least a few times a month, I try to dedicate time towards sort of thinking bigger, because that's also what gives me energy.
So as the president of Spotify, what advice would you give future leaders who want to make significant impact in the tech industry?
So I'm a co-president together with Alex Norström, who runs the business and content side, which is very important because I think like dividing that responsibility in two lets me focus much more on my part, and similar for him. So it's a really good relationship to have. Maybe it sounds a little bit plain, but I mentioned some of the leadership styles. Mm-hmm. So I think being thoughtful about what kind of leadership style you like and try to foster that. So I like the Socratic debate. So I tend to talk a lot about that privately in the company and publicly, actually. I try to do podcasts myself where I try to showcase the style that I would like. And that means that people who started the company, they've sometimes heard me talking for hours already. So they feel like they know me. And it just gets easier. So being deliberate about your leadership style and what you want to achieve, and then try to model that, I think is important. And then I think there is no replacement for staying in the details. At various points in my career, there's so much pressure on manager stuff that your incentives are to get out of the details and just focus on keeping people happy and so forth. I've always found that to be a mistake. So then I try to go back, try to code a bit again, try to really stay in the details for two reasons. It is my passion. And my passion, the reason I started here was technology, not being a manager of people. So if I lose that inspirational part, I don't think I would have the stamina to deal with all the people problems. And then so it's just to keep my passion alive. But then also, I feel like I've worked sometimes for people that don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't like that. So I don't want to be the guy where people say like, he doesn't know what I'm talking about. He doesn't understand this anymore. That's my biggest fear. So I think staying in the details is important. And when you can't stay in the details anymore, it's just time to go.
I guess also just being a good listener, because you said before, I mean, you guys have a lot of collaboration. So I feel like you make all the people that work for Spotify feel comfortable to share their ideas as well.
I hope so. I think so. And we have these processes that I talked about, the bottoms-up processes where people can pitch their ideas to make sure that happens. It could be the case that mostly, managers and senior people submit their bets. So as a counter to that, we have these hack weeks where we take, like a week out of the company, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you think about it, you have like 5,000 people for a week. That's 5,000 weeks of work that we dedicate just to like bottoms-up innovation, where you can work on anything you want. And a lot of our best ideas that we ship like a year later, they start in those hack weeks. They don't go all the way to shipping, but someone who believes in something somewhere proves like this is going to work. I can build a prototype of this in a week. And then that often goes into this 6-month cycle and comes out as a product a year later. So we have some mechanisms to try to ensure that happens, not just hope that it happens.
Oh, very cool. So I have a very long flight back home to Canada. And you were saying before, every day you're listening to new podcasts or audiobooks. What is one audiobook you'd recommend for me for my flight home? I love anything motivational, self-help, business-oriented, anything that can kind of make me a better person overall. What would you recommend?
So I mentioned it at the beginning, but right now I'm re-listening to a book I listened to in the 90s called Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch, who invented the quantum computer. I was fortunate enough to meet him a week ago.
A week ago?
He's a very inspirational person. He's very happy with his life, and he's done some very exciting things. I think he's a good reasoner. It's sort of like one of these books that tells you how to think about life, that zooms out. He's talking about what it's going to be like when we're starting to populate the solar system and are out among the stars, like those kinds of. And I think for me, it's really useful to have those thoughts every now and then when you get too stuck in the reality, and sometimes reality feels a bit bleak. Then it's good to have those big, beautiful thoughts of a better future.
I'm definitely writing that down. I'll put the link in the description so you guys can check out that audiobook as well. Well, Gustav, thank you again. We are building a community of future forward thinkers here, and I'm very inspired by your vision. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on Future Obsession. We'll be back next week for more.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.